Welcome to TechCabal Live. Thank you so much for joining us today. We do appreciate your presence. If I can ask the speakers to please turn on their cameras so that the audience can see you. We appreciate your presence. Today's event is kindly sponsored by Chaka, which powers borderless investing for Africa, and is now fully licensed by the SEC, which I really must give them a hand for. They just announced that news this week. And I know regulation is a conversation that we've been having. And so it is impressive to see a company that has had some challenges with regulators sort of solve that problem. And so, yeah, we're wishing Chaka great things on their mission to build a borderless portfolio across Africa. If you want to invest and earn dollars, and then also offer your customers access to dollar investments. So reach out to them. You can go to chaka.com/license. Again, thank you, everyone. This event is also in partnership with McKinsey & Company, and we thank them for their presence. I'm going to introduce the speakers who are here today with us. And if I can just make sure I can see everyone. Great. So today's event features some really sort of important and innovative people who are driving the future of banking, of fintech, of technology broadly. First up, I'm going to introduce Mr. Abubakar Suleiman. Abu is a seasoned professional. He's got 20 years of experience working in the banking industry. He's the CEO of Sterling Bank, which is doing a range of really innovative sort of experiments in banking and really moving the industry forward. His goal as CEO there is to optimize the impact of sort of banking and financial intermediation in the various sectors that can really grow the economy, and work to create a future of shared prosperity for all Nigerians. Priority sectors for Sterling Bank, and you might have heard of their heart approach, is health, agriculture, education, renewable energy, and transportation. And I think the work they've been doing has been really interesting and really innovative. Welcome, Abu. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much, Amira.
Excellent. Next up is Tomilola Majekodunmi. She's the CEO of 5554 Technologies, popularly known as Bankly. Bankly aims to bank the unbanked with a core mission of digitizing cash and enabling the informal sector to grow their income safely and simply. That's really important task. We know how big the informal sector is in Nigeria, and Bankly's work is critical in that space. Tomi started her career as a financial analyst at Meristem, and then did her MBA in Singapore and Australia. Why didn't you take me with you? She has prior startup experience as head of business at Aladdin Nano Limited, where she developed and managed products like Smart Credit, which is a micro lending product. Bankly is doing incredible work. They have 15,000 banking agents nationwide, and their goal is to enable 2 million Nigerians to bank simply by 2025. Tomi is also a recipient of the Cartier Award 2021, which was in recognition of her work in building financial products for unbanked Nigerians. Welcome, Tomi.
Thank you. I didn't know. Thank you, Tomorrow. Yeah.
Okay. Tosin Osibodu is next up. He's a stockbroker and system engineer with experience working across technology, growth, and marketplaces in Africa. He's a member of the Nigerian Chartered Institute of Stockbrokers and is a seasoned long-term investor. Before he started Chaka, Tosin worked at GTB, InterSwitch, Wayfair, and AppNexus. He started out building bots to trade options and Forex and derivatives in his undergraduate years, meaning that he used those years more usefully than I did. And I mean, from that place, he sort of like started to build trading systems, all of which have led up to Chaka, which is the company that it is right now. When he's not enabling and empowering talented people at Chaka, Tosin loves to write, rest, and meditate. He has a bachelor's degree in science from systems science engineering, from University of Pennsylvania, and a master's in engineering management from Dartmouth. Welcome, Tosin.
Thank you for having me, Tomilola.
Excellent. Next up is Oviosu, who I'm sure everybody here knows. Tayo is founder and group CEO of Paga, which is a mobile payments company focused on digitizing cash and delivering financial access in emerging markets. It's the leading mobile money service in Nigeria, which is its first market, although they are growing and expanding into other markets now. Prior to joining Paga, founding Paga, Tayo was vice president at Trevant Capital Partners, which is a PE fund based here in West Africa. Besides that, he was a manager of corporate development at Cisco Systems in California. Paga is one of the earliest and most important sort of companies in this space, in the mobile payment space in Nigeria, and their work has been globally recognized. In 2014, CNBC selected Tayo as Entrepreneur of the Year. In 2015, the Africa Leadership Network selected Paga as an outstanding growing company of the year in Africa. Tayo is an Endeavor entrepreneur and a member of the Young Presidents Organization. He's an active angel investor and a co-founder of Kairos Angels, which is an angel investment club. He has a BSc in electrical engineering from University of Southern California, cum laude, and an MBA from Stanford University. Welcome, Tayo.
Hi, Tomilola. Thank you very much for having me here.
No problem. Next up is Robert. Elsa, if I can ask you to turn on your camera because we can't see you. But next up is Robert Kotei. He's the Operations Director for Africa for RIA Money Transfer. Robert is based in RIA's African Hub in Dakar, Senegal, beautiful city. And he's been there since 2013. He is responsible for RIA's omni-channel operations in all 43 countries in Africa where they operate. And he spearheads business development in Anglophone Africa. Robert has 19 years of experience in the remittance industry and has developed business partnerships across a wide range of remittance receiving countries in Africa. Funny words. He has an MBA from Lancaster University in the UK and a BA in economics from the University of Ghana. Welcome, Robert.
Thank you. Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
Excellent. And last, but certainly not least, is Elsa. She's the General Manager for Commercials, Mobile Financial Services at MTN Nigeria. You might have heard of them, small telco. She joined MTN Nigeria 2 years ago from MTN Uganda, where she also served as the GM for Mobile Financial Services. She's got 13 years of management experience in mobile money, marketing, telecoms, and business consulting, and has worked with everyone from Orange Cameroon, Orange in the CAR, and McKinsey & Company. She has a Bachelor of Business Administration from HSA in Paris and a Master's in Project Innovation and Conception from the École Polytechnique in France. And she spends her spare time at Cadre Films, which is an association that she co-founded, which focuses on training media productions. We should talk, Elsa. She's also strongly interested in AI, robotics, and business development in Africa. Welcome, Elsa.
Thank you.
Excellent. Today's conversation is about how to find and leverage partnerships to grow your startup. And it's a really interesting and critical topic. We know that partnerships are super critical for startups. You won't start with all the cash that you need, although there is more capital coming these days. And the speakers that we have today, I'm super excited about. It's a really impressive lineup of people who really understand the space, who do partnerships from a range of different angles. We have the big players, we have a bank, we have a telco, we have sort of some of the leading fintechs in the space, and I'm looking forward to a robust conversation. To moderate the conversation today is Topsy Kola Oyeni. Topsy is a partner in McKinsey's Lagos office focused on financial services. She serves financial institutions, regulators, and investors in developing ambitious growth programs and executing large-scale transformations. She's a thought leader on financial services innovation in Africa and has led multiple projects and co-authored reports on how to unlock the potential of digital financial services in Africa. Welcome, Topsy.
Thanks, Tomilola. Great to be here. Thank you.
Excellent. I'm going to hand it over to you in a moment. Just the last kind of bit of housekeeping. I hope I've not used more than my 10 minutes on introductions. We're going to have the panel session, which will take about 55 minutes. And then there's a Q&A that will last 30 minutes before the closing remarks. If I can ask everyone who has a question to please put your questions in the Q&A form. If you look at your screen, bottom right, it's the last sort of button to the right. And that's where we're going to pick questions from. Enjoy the conversation. Thank you, everyone. Over to you, Tosin.
Thank you very much, Tomiwa, and good afternoon, everyone. Great to be here and excited to get this conversation going. I think to set the context for what we'll be discussing, I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, Mayowa Kuyoro, who's also a partner at McKinsey and heads our West African financial services practice. Mayowa, over to you.
Thank you very much, Tosi, and good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure to be with you this morning. As Tosi said, I will be setting the context for, what is happening, why are we talking about partnerships, why is it important, and hopefully set the scene into the conversation. When people talk about partnerships with fintechs, a lot of the time people talk about bank partnerships. But the fact of the matter is actually, when you look at it, there's actually partnerships across the board. So, I just took an example of fintech banks and big techs and put them on 3 dimensions. And you can see, for example, that you have partnerships with fintechs and big techs. You have partnerships with banks and fintechs. You also have fintech partnerships. So essentially, you have all different types of partnerships across the board. And as we think about, even beyond sort of financial services and technology, you're also beginning to think about, see partnerships and think about other collaborations. So for example, you have the telcos, you have Elsa on the panel this morning, you have FMCG companies and so on and so forth. So I think when we talk about the partnership, one of the things that we should definitely do is open up the aperture as to how we think about it. I think the second thing we should think about is how and where do we collaborate as people who are looking into it. So if you're thinking about, partnering with your fintechs, who and how do you collaborate and how do you ensure that there is value created across the board? If you go to the next slide, producer, whoever is changing the chat, the slides, can I ask you to move to the next slide? We see sort of 5 emerging partnership models, and this is by no means exhaustive. This is just some examples that we wanted to put down. So the first one is sort of your classic vendor relationship where a fintech provides a service to, and a lot of this, by the way, are bank and fintech type of examples, where a fintech provides straight up service to a bank. So some of the reasons for that could be that they have technology, it's a lot easier, people want to go to market a lot quicker, and so on and so forth. So you see those sort of partnerships emerging. The second one is distribution. And essentially here, both parties could come together to leverage existing captive captive customer bases. And an example that I like actually that we've seen in our market is how Kotei partners with banks to make sure that they can do ATMs, they can go into the bank, they can service, and then they're not taking in the fixed cost of the infrastructure that they have there. The third one, or the third partnership models that we're seeing in our market is sort of strategic investments. And here the big one, a big example that we can think about is 2 years ago, Visa made a $200 million investment into Switch, taking an ownership deal. And they're doing that, actually, if you look at Visa, MasterCard, they're doing that across the board. Then you have potentially joint ventures where institutions come together, not necessarily to, it's not necessarily a straight up purchase or an investment, but they come together to sort of go after a business or unlock or create new opportunities together. And then finally, the one that is the most outright is acquisitions. And again, we've seen a number of that across the African market. So for example, Stripe buying Paystack, Network International buying DPO. So there's quite a lot of those sort of partnerships. Again, when we think about partnerships, when we think about how we do it, there isn't a one way to do it. On the next slide, my final sort of piece here is that as we think about your partnership, the success should not be taken for granted, and both parties need to be well prepared. So when we look at a couple of things we need to make sure that you have explicit conversations around. So ensure that there is alignment on the strategy. You should ensure that there is alignment on sort of people and resources and culture. How are you going to share data? What is the procurement process? How are you going to actually technically combine, to go after the opportunities? And how do you ensure that there is regulatory compliance? And I think that is very important in our market. And I'm sure some of the panelists will talk about the role of regulation there. one of the things that we saw when we looked across partnerships in the financial services space is that 59% of breaches tends to be attributed to third parties. So as you think about your coming together, it's very important to keep this pitfalls or things to look out for as you're going into your partnerships. And on that note, I will hand over to Topsy, who will then talk with the panelists. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Maiwa, for helping set the context. There's an old adage that says, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. But you might argue that in the fast, dynamic, and highly regulated space of digital financial services, if you want to go fast, and literally if you want to go far across borders, you need partnerships. And that's what we're going to delve into today. We're going to talk about how do you determine the partnerships that you need? How do you get access to these partners? How do you define the win-win propositions that are required to sustain the partnership? And how do you actually manage and sort of monitor the partnership performance? As Tomiwa already introduced a panel, we have a great diverse panel who can speak to this topic from different angles, from different industries, from different parts of the ecosystem, and also from a geographical perspective. So really looking forward to the discussion. I'd love to start off with Abu. Abu, you've been a very strong advocate for ecosystem partnerships, and you've not just talked the talk, you've walked the walk. Can you share with us, just give us some insight as to how you have leveraged partnerships from a Sterling Bank perspective to drive growth? And what do you think are some of the impediments preventing more of such partnerships?
Thank you. I was hoping you would start with someone better equipped, but I will take it on from here. I think the challenge that I have found when it comes to partnership is that more often than not, we are not clear about the problem we're trying to solve, right? So we're trying to jump into partnership because we think that there's a profit to be shared. And so the conversation is really about who gets what value. What I have found to be very useful is when people are very clear about the problem that they're trying to solve. In approaching that partnership conversation, we're asking ourselves, are we also interested in solving the same problem? And secondly, are we equipped to solve the problem, or are they better equipped to solve the problem? So when I think of partnership, my thought process is that are we clear about the problem to solve? Because a lot of the conversations are around what I consider to be problems that I already have solved, or problems that to my mind doesn't really challenge us as much as we think it does, right? So how have I articulated the partnership model? We've looked at it from the perspective of sectors to say, you know what, I want to solve a problem in a particular sector, right? And because I'm only financial services, it means that by implication, I need partners in that sector anyway. And therefore, anyone who is a tech player in the sector automatically becomes my partner. And I don't view the person as a competitor in financial services. I view the person as an enabler in the sector that they are solving for. So that's the first thought process. Are we clear about the problem to solve? The second challenge that I think we face is that we think of partnership in terms of institutions. So I want to partner with a bank. I think we should think of partnership in terms of capabilities. I need to partner with somebody who can handle all regulatory issues, right? So that is the capability I'm interested in. It just so happens to be a bank because that's what they do every day. Or I need to partner with someone who has got, the MTN customer base. I need 100 million customers on the table. It matters. I'm going to MTN today. It could be a betting company with 100 million customers tomorrow. It doesn't matter, but I need that access to 100 million customers. So that way the conversation is around, I'm going to Abu, not because it's a bank. I'm going to Abu because he has a license that can enable me play. So I think that conversation about, need to come, and sometimes you may find out that the person is not in financial service. How has it worked for us? I think the biggest benefit to me and to the institution is that it has challenged our thought process. So as much as we have not necessarily monetized a lot of the partnership on the scale that we're looking for, it has changed our thought process around the problem to solve, where the value lies, what people are capable of doing if you actually sit down and listen to them. And I'll sum it up by saying, look, I think of partnership from 3 levels. It could be a transactional partnership. I want to do a conversation with you where we are generating revenue and we're sharing it. It could be a transitional partnership where I think fundamentally it has value now, may not be valuable going forward, but we can use it now. But the best one is when it's a transformational partnership where we both come to the conclusion that things have to change and that if we work together, we'll have a chance to alter that ecosystem. And more than not, I think the partnership we need and the ones that are the most difficult to resolve are the transformational partnership. And I think a lot of our effort is really focused on the transactional partnership, which is where there's so much debate as to who gets what and what is the financial terms.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you so much, Abu. I think for me, what I took out of that is in terms of how you think about partnerships, think about problems you're trying to solve and who has capabilities. And all of a sudden, the net of your potential partners widen quite extensively. I'd love to jump over to Tomi, right? Within this context of thinking about problems that you want to solve and coming on that basis versus the traditional come and let's share revenue. As a startup, early stages, how did you think about the partnerships that you required? Like, when did you even know you needed partnerships? And then how did you think about who could fit where?
Yeah, thank you, Topsy. So we started out very clear that we needed partnerships in 3 levels. The first one for us was more regular. In fact, I would say I would start from where we started from, then where we had to migrate to because of those lack of partnerships. So we knew that what we were trying to solve for was increasing the pie of people who are already digital. We know the numbers that too many people are within that space, that 45 million that the banks are serving. And our own outlook was that too many startups were trying to cut a slice of that pie, which we thought that was an already served segment. So we thought that how can we serve the people who are not already served and how can we bring them into the bank space? So the first thing we wanted to do was to partner with the telcos. The first model we built was to just leverage the telcos and use to be able to digitize savings, to digitize the Agile system. That didn't, I'm sure, like we talked about, the pie dynamics didn't make that move as smoothly, getting to the right people, talking to the right people, or even making the move go on as fast as possible. You're in this conversation for a year, 90 or 180 days. And then we realized that, okay, if we can't go through the telcos, because again, if the ecosystem or the partner that you're doing is already trying to serve in that space, not in a way that they want to partner, not in I like what Mr. Suleiman said about transformational, not in a way that then we decided, okay, how about we go to an agent network? That also didn't pan out as I believe we were trying to partner in 3 ways. First, from the regulatory side. Second, from the infrastructure side. Infrastructure, both the technology and the fiscal, or I would say technology and physical infrastructure, which I believe is what people like Paga has built over the last 10 years. And the third thing was then investment. And we did 2 of it. We did the regulatory side and the banks, where we were able to get the bank to believe in us at that time and then move on to the next stage to cover us regulatory-wise while we're trying to figure it out. And then over time, we were also able to leverage investment. And investment sometimes doesn't have to be in cash. It could be you need to buy an asset and they have the cash flow to say, we'll put this down as long as you pass on your transactions exclusively through us. But like Mr. Suleiman has said, when we continue to think of partnership from a more transactional side, the challenge we will face is, because if I then start talking about the challenges we encountered, both from the regulatory and those investment side, I don't think we would sit here today, but I will just share 2 major lessons from a startup. One of the biggest lessons I learned was that sometimes if you're partnering because of the paradigm, before you sign on any contract, there should be a test period, because you sometimes don't even know the hidden terms or certain things that might come down the line. So a test period before a younger startup is able to fully sign, because then you can then leverage, there might be a bit of a even level playing field when signing those contracts. So we didn't set out to build an agent network, for instance. We wanted to because we knew that there was a difference between access and inclusion. We believe that access was still providing services. Agent network at that point was still providing services heavily for the banked. And we're very specific about trying to capture people who were keeping their money under their mattresses, keeping their money in their shops. So we're like, how do we bring those funds into the oversight of the banks? How can the banks have access into this shadow economy that was not existing? But we had to spend 2 years building the infrastructure we needed because we couldn't get a fair or just partnerships because we were just too young or too small for these big players. And that's where I've experienced.
Thanks so much, Tomi. I love what you said about unfair and unjust partnerships. So I'm going to turn it over to Tayo, right? I mean, Tayo, you've been in this space for a long time. You started out before fintech was in fashion. And at that stage, you needed to build partnerships. And you could say it was sort of not the right balance of power. So I think for the folks in our audience who are early starting out, they don't have a large network, they don't have a large customer base, but they need some of these partnerships to scale. Can you share your experience of how you went about creating these partnerships? How did you even identify them? How did you get access? And what has changed from then to now, right, given where you are?
Yeah, no, thank you. By the way, yeah, fintech, the word fintech did not exist. It's a real pleasure to be here with you all. And I really resonate with what I've heard so far. Look, I mean, as you were asking the question, Topsy, I mean, the example that came to me was the first partnership we had with our friends InterSwitch. And I never forget a particular day that, and I hope Mitchell will forgive me for sharing the story, but Mitchell calling me into his office and saying, Tayo, our revenue from Paga is going like this, and then now it's going down. What's going on? And I said to him, Mitchell, we were very upfront and open about the economics in our chain and the need to change the power balance in the conversation with you. But it didn't happen. Right. And so we ended up we actually set out, if you can believe this, we're connected today as Paga to all billers in Nigeria directly, right? And we in turn give that to banks. We give that to companies that are actually competitors to us today. But we did not set out to do that. We actually set out to just partner with InterSwitch on it. And I said, well, because the economics did not work out, we ended up having to go do it ourselves. And it was a lot of work to go do it. And I always remind myself that story and remind my team that story, because I don't want us to, the flip to happen to us as well, right? So we always, when we engage partners, I think it's really important to make sure that the economics works out for everybody. And so for me, it's always about being very open about in fact, I ask, what are your economics? What are the things you're trying to solve for? And how can we make sure that there's something there that solves for everybody? So I think that's really important to just continually do and be very open about how we partner with people, making sure there's something on the table. And honestly, how you get access, it's knocking on doors. It's always, don't ever hesitate to ask the question, right? The biggest partner that we had at the beginning of Paga, I literally met the person at a gym. And actually someone I'd been seeing at the gym very regularly. And I just happened to say, oh, what do you do? And told me what he did. I was like, are you kidding me? You're the person I've been trying to figure out how to meet. And actually the first time I walked into his office, we literally felt like we're kicked out. Like, well, what are you guys talking about? Like, there's nothing to do here. And then they called me back and said, okay, actually, we're thinking of XYZ. Could you help us there? Right. And that's how that partnership went. And it's been 11, 12 years. It's been a great partnership with MultiChoice. And so I think, just being ready in whatever moment it is to, actually share what you're trying to accomplish. I think as Abubakar said, really figuring that out. Sometimes like what the other side wants to accomplish is different from yours. So also trying to understand what their goals are. And not just of the corporate, but actually the individuals, because they have KPIs, right? That they're trying to meet. So what are their KPIs? What is the CEO of Sterling Bank going to hold them accountable for, right? How do I help you meet that KPI? I think Robert, again, because like we partner with remittance companies, right, as well, right? I want Robert, who's our partner, to meet his KPIs because that's his own bottom line. Right. And so we think about that kind of stuff. And I think that's where you start seeing the opening of opportunity to work together. And I think just sort of staying, clear about the interests of both sides, making sure there's value on the table for everybody. Right. And then the last part internally is making sure that you have an owner for every relationship. There is no partnership we have several partnerships, hundreds, that we don't have an internal owner. And I know who's responsible for that relationship. If there's any conversation about that relationship, we know who the person is. And me as CEO, there are a few of them that I have responsibility for as well.
Thanks a lot for sharing that, Tayo. Very practical thoughts, right? It's about solving problems. I think Abu alluded to that. It's about relationships. You're dealing with human beings. So it's not just solving the problem for the institution, but for the specific individual concerned. And network, you never know, you might meet your partner in the gym. So Robert, I want to shift directions to your end because I think you have an interesting perspective from the RIA side where you seek partnerships, you seek to create partnerships across different countries, and you probably are also in the position of evaluating partnerships of different startups that might reach out to you. How do you think about identifying partners that you go after, and how do you also evaluate requests that come into your office?
Well, thank you. Thank you. Again, it's a pleasure to be here. Well, it's, I mean, I tend to resonate with what everyone has said. I'm aligned particularly to Tayo's submission as well. So what do we look out for? I mean, first of all, just to set the scene for those that may not be very familiar with our industry. So RIA is the second largest global money transfer company. We operate in over 160 countries. In Africa, we're in about 43, and we facilitate omni-channel transfers of funds across the world. So partnerships are very, very important. You cannot have a physical operation in every country that you operate in. So you need partnerships, and we work with fintechs, so to speak, that allow us to terminate remittances in various countries. Right, so we, for example, have some aggregators that we work with as fintechs, and they help us to facilitate remittances into mobile money accounts, mobile wallets, into bank accounts in various countries. And in Africa, we do that in 43. So what do we look out for? I mean, firstly, we live in a very highly regulated industry. So we are always, have to keep our eyes on who's regulating who's being checked, who is doing it the right way. So you really have to get yourself together when it comes to regulation and make sure that you've got that pinned in. So that's key. Secondly, also in our industry, we tend to want to have a wide reach. So Nigeria, for example, is a huge market for us and it's big. But at the end of the day, is there an opportunity for you to look outside Nigeria? So if you're sitting in Nigeria as a fintech and you can facilitate transfers into every bank account, for example, are you looking outside the borders of Nigeria? Because companies like us would like to do a good partnership that will give you a good breath, So try to look out for whether you can step out of that comfort zone or expand your reach a little bit. So that's key. And then also try and establish a base where you have direct partnerships and direct integrations. So what do I mean by that? A fintech can work through another fintech before they hit the endpoint, which is probably a bank account or a mobile wallet. And that becomes a bit difficult because you have too many integrations. So as much as possible, try to hit the target, And then also pricing is very key in our industry. What are you bringing on board? It's always good to do a good research on your pricing strategy before you can, approach companies like ourselves is very key. And then the whole thing about, technology infrastructure and how solid you are, what's behind your technology. It's always so good to do a good research and make sure that, you've got your bases covered and you're going to really deliver something that works, something that gives a lot of speed and a lot of traction in the industry. So I'll just stop right there because I don't want to take too much of your time, but there's a whole long list. But let me just establish the foundation, which is you need to understand the market you're operating in and make sure that you're coming with a very, very good value proposition. The others I could share, but I'll just leave it there. Maybe when we have some Q&As specific to our industry, then I can get more specific.
Thanks a lot, Robert. I think this whole point of value proposition keeps coming up, and I'm going to get back to that specific question as we go along. But before that, I'd love to jump to Elsa. And here I'd really love to hear from you how MTN, as a telco, a leading telco in the market, is thinking about partnerships. What kind of partnerships are you looking at? How are you thinking of working with the ecosystem to drive your strategic objectives?
Okay, thanks for this question. So I think the biggest difficulty for MTN
is like, as every big organization, it's not easy to do a partnership with MTN. So when you start to engage for partnership with smaller entities, as fintech, I think there is like 3 main things to consider, and that because like the small company dealing with a big giant, like what are the 3 important things to consider? So I think the number 1 is like time. So fintech, if you're, especially if you're at the early stage of the fintech, the notion of time not the same than MTN, right? So something that you might expect, no, I want it next month. Maybe for MTN, something that is okay in 6 months and maybe in 12 months. So there is always that time discrepancy that is difficult to manage in that partnership. And I think if it's straightforward at the beginning, the things are clearer, it makes the thing easy. So never like put like 100% of your business development based on this partnership, because you cannot control the time of the big corporation who actually make that deal happen. And after the contract sign off, what again will happen? So I think that's one very important thing. Like let's immediately at the beginning of discussion agree on what is the realistic timeline on what is going to happen there. So secondly, I think it's the scope. So many times I met like so many fintech, and so at the beginning, I mean, we start the conversation because there is something that answers an immediate need. And I think it answered to what Abubakar said at the beginning. Let's really like, what is exactly the problem, right? Because very soon the discussion tend to, so many things and the scope becomes so wide that at the end of the day, like, we are going to lose a lot of time versus focusing on one single thing to start with in this partnership. Let's deliver on this, and then we'll see, we'll expand. So that's like another typical pitfall that at the early stage needs to be really, we need to ring fence. That's the scope of that partnership. And lastly, you talk about that. I think, yes, the contact person within an organization, within MTN is very important. Yes, maybe you know somebody within MTN, that's true. But if you want to talk fintech, it's important that you talk to the fintech people so that you don't like immediately ask your contact to connect you with the right person, right? So that we immediately and you can start to build that relationship, because not only like sending an email and MTN is going to jump on your email and the thing. So also take the time, try to discover the problem, there is a whole approach on like relationship, network thing that is going to happen. So I think those are the 3 main things that when I start on the behalf of MTN or our fintech subsidiary discussion with smaller entity, that's always the 3 things I'm asking myself, say, okay, are we clear on those 3 dimensions? Is it actually happening? And then should we proceed? And to ask a bit of a last controversial question that might also guide the next one, do we really need partnership today? In a world that is moving to open API, do it yourself, get my API and do whatever we need, do we actually need strong partnership, or can we move to a lighter form of partnership that actually doesn't require no one to meet in a first stage, right? Get my API, run with it, and maybe at a later stage, as you really grow your number, maybe I would like to discuss the brand, co-branding, and so on. But do we really need partnership to work together?
Very interesting, Elsa. Elsa has brought a spin to the conversation, and I think we'll delve a bit deeper into that in a second. We'll come back to that. But I think she gave very practical suggestions on how you work with large corporates in terms of partnerships, and I think it'll be good to share, look through the chat to see some of the takeaways. Tosin, I'd love to come to you. You guys are doing great stuff with Chaka, enabling access to borderless investments. And our assumption is that has required you to create partnerships both locally and foreign partnerships. What has been your experience in developing these partnerships across borders, right? Do you find it's been easier in one dimension or the other? And have your foreign partnerships supported or enabled you in getting access to local partnerships? We're good to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, no, thanks for the introduction, Tosin. It's been great listening to everybody's discussion as well. So for us, just to break the ice, for Shaka, what we do is we enable borderless investing. As you mentioned, And we do this through our app, but we've also enabled API integrations and SDK widgets for asset managers, brokers, insurance companies, fintechs, and some banks. So we're very excited about the future of investing, and it's been a core belief that it should be widely distributed. So in getting started, regulation was the first thing, actually, before we launched. This is late 2019. Getting the right regulatory ability, both outside Nigeria and within Nigeria, that was where we focused on, and partnerships were very key to doing that in terms of regulated partnerships. For us, the key thing was demonstrating our earnestness, which is if we are structured already like we're regulated, and more people are going to have confidence in us. So even though my background was in systems engineering, and I came through this all through engineering, and I just thought of, let's just be real, I thought of brokerage as e-commerce with some rules. And I actually became a stockbroker to make sure that I deeply understood the subject material. If you're in a room with other people who maybe don't get the tech, speaking tech and maybe trivializing the importance of the rules as just like arbitrary code isn't necessarily the best thing. You need to understand the history of why the regulation is there and that person's perspective of it. And so for us, that was very key to building trust very quickly, both locally and outside. Obviously, fast forward, and we always took compliance very seriously, and definitely notified everyone of what we were doing. But when you fast forward, a year plus, we obviously had our engagement with SEC, and that brought us to another moment where, we could either say, as is often, as a lot of people do, like, it's us versus them, or some kind of regulator versus innovator. But I think if you just plot the long-term view of any industry, where on the upside, everybody praises innovation, and then any downside, everybody wants regulation, is that there's always going to be that balance. There's the dialectic there, and the truth is somewhere in the middle. And so we were very, very proactive about that. And so despite what it may have appeared like, we were very keen to approach dealing with regulators like a partner, which is, what are your goals? And how are we aligned with those goals? So whether it's financial inclusion and being able to give people access to be able to start getting invested with less than they've ever been able to do before, we're very keen on that. And we know that that was a goal that we were aligned with the regulators on, as well as increasing retail participation in the stock market. So somebody with 2,000 Naira from Maiduguri who would have had to go, who previously would have had to save up to 20,000 or 30,000, who would have had to take, gone up 20,000, 30,000, that person can now start with just 2,000. They didn't even have to travel. They didn't need to have to figure out, the going back and forth and cost again, start investing, all those friction drops. And again, aligned with the regulator. And also when it comes to encouraging diaspora and other people around the world to invest in Nigeria, just to make Nigeria globally accessible from an investment's point of view, we're also aligned. So it was very clear when we engaged and we looked at our long-term view that we are a player that's very pro the local market and very pro Nigeria's financial markets developing and fusing with the world. That's a core belief we have, that digitization of the financial markets is going to kind of create a one financial market around the world. And how is Nigeria's financial market going to grow with that, and what kind of interactions with the rest of the world will encourage that? So we were very focused on that. And of course, it's great that I'm on this panel able to talk about it. That success came of that this week. But just taking a step back as well, and looking at that same span of time and our actual commercial mission, for us, we always wanted to make sure that digital investing and the best investing options are available, not just via us, but through partners and through the very best of partners. And so, very early on, we have developed a lot of relationships, and as I said, with leading asset managers, fintechs, some banks, as well as insurance companies. And we're very excited with the clarity provided by regulation for a lot of people here to see them roll out. For us, I think the key thing as we approached it was that the service we offer is a high trust one. You can't walk into anywhere, can't go to MTN and say, hey, just pass your customer funds to us, or to Paga and say, hey, just do that. You can't just leave that to be a mid-level decision. It's always a C-suite decision. It involves regulatory, it involves trust. You've got to be able to look the other person in the eye, and they've got to believe that this is somebody who will earnestly fight to make sure this is successful, and not somebody who will make this just another partnership and just like roll the dice. And what we've seen has been very, very encouraging. We've seen that by painting the picture of the regulatory clearance that partners can get by looking at, of course, the revenue value add commercials is always attractive. But I think looking beyond that to what are some nuanced things that are benefits based on what the other party wants. So for example, investing means you're inherently building a long-term relationship with the customer. And if a service wants to do that and can offer investment solutions, they are going to be able to build more long-term relationships with their customers. And then trading and the dynamism of data in the market means that people just, it's just human nature and dopamine, are more likely to check that app repeatedly. So if you want high return visits to your app, there's certain benefits that provided in that way. So beyond commercial benefits, we're very, very excited about when we talk to partners about the benefits, ancillary benefits of partnerships. We've just seen how much that's accelerated our discussions, really understanding what's beneficial to them and making sure our approach is about that. And then, obviously protecting the ability for us to deliver. We've seen that be a successful approach, and we're really looking forward to rollouts and more people here learning about the partnerships that we've developed.
Excellent. Tosin, thanks a lot. I like the angle you shared around looking at the regulator almost as a partner and trying to figure out what problems that they're trying to solve. Robert also mentioned how you look for fintechs or partners that are regulatory compliant, right? And I'm seeing a lot of questions in the chat box about how do you navigate these regulatory hurdles and deal with the regulator. So I think no better person to give us some insight into that than Abu, right? Obviously, as a bank, you're highly regulated. How can fintechs help sort of remove the barriers around regulatory challenges, right? Like what can fintechs do to minimize the regulatory hurdles that would need to be crossed for an effective partnership?
Thank you, Topsy. I guess I will start by sharing something someone told me once. We're having one of those very active, critical moments where we were discussing what was going on in Abuja and how certain wrong decisions were being made. And the person said, when you have 5 intelligent people in a room and they are making the wrong decision, they know what they are doing. So why am I saying this? More often than not, it is a question of alignment. So don't assume that the people are unintelligent. Even the regulator, even the bankers, assume that there is a misalignment of incentives and that what they're interested in is different from what you are interested in. And that allows you to approach the problem from how do I align incentives? What is it that they need that I can offer them that would allow those intelligent people to obviously redirect their effort towards solving the problem? That's the number one thinking for me. And I think it has to be a principle, right? It's very easy when you see things that are not working to presuppose or to assume that the people are not smart enough. And once you start from that angle, you're going to miss a lot of important things. The second comment I would make about the value that the fintech bring on board that allow us to optimize regulation is that on day one as a fintech, you are under the radar. Right. So you are under the radar. It allows you to think differently. It allows you to act differently. It allows you to explore differently. So that by the time you are getting to relevance and people are thinking of how to, cage you, as it were, you have created such value that they have to be, in my view, strategic even in regulating you. Whereas if I carry out one transaction today that is not within what the regulatory purview is, I would immediately be nabbed. You can have your first 100,000 transactions before they're like, hey, who are those guys and what are we doing about it? So think of that as an opportunity for you to act as a huge sandbox, right, for doing things that we otherwise cannot do. The second comment I would make about how fintech, in my view, can help us deal with regulation, it's that we are trying to optimize regulation. That's the only permission that I have. I cannot rewrite it. I can try to influence it, but more than not, I'm trying to optimize within existing regulation. What you have an opportunity to do is to build a parallel system that says, this is what the regulator is concerned about. I can think differently and come up with a, sort of a scheme or an idea that could totally bypass the regulation or make it irrelevant. And by the time I'm having a conversation, that thought process is so comprehensive and end-to-end that they are forced to listen. Whereas if I were to open my mouth in a meeting with my regulator, say, you know what if we jettison the bullets will start flying in the room immediately? Like, that's not your job. So what am I saying? I think you guys, the guys in the fintech space, you are a critical part of how we do experimentation. Without you, we cannot do those experimentation. So think about that. And secondly, a couple of years ago, we wanted to build the integration well ahead of open banking so that fintechs can start to experiment, within the real ecosystem. And luckily for us, we're all headed there now. We're now beginning to see regulatory support for it. We're beginning to see collaboration for it. We sort of bankrolled open banking conversation when it first started in this country. And we're happy that it's reached a point where it is now standing on its own and we'll begin to see regulation to support it. So my sense is that, and this is so that I don't take too much time, the market, it's not what is, the market is what can be. More often than not, we think there is a fight for this rather insignificant size of financial services, which we must all agree is insignificant for 200 million people, right? And therefore, if we were to go after fighting for it, we're wasting our time. However, there is a potential to have a multiple of this market happen very quickly, thanks to digitization, thanks to new players. What I would advise any fintech that seeks to disrupt is to also seek to share part of what they are creating with those who might make it difficult for them, right? Who might consider it an affront. Think of a way to pull us in. If you're going to build something that is twice the size of the current financial services system, if you give even a tenth of it to the current player, suddenly it is sufficient for them to become enablers rather than people who are looking at you with suspicion. And finally, I think Tosin's comment is spot on. And I think Tomilola also talked about it. Let us engage regulators like the intelligent people that they are. Let us understand that they have problems that we cannot see, and let us co-create regulations with them rather than thinking that their regulation is bad and we go onto social media to scream. And after that, the conversation dies because they have the power to continue to misregulate and there's nothing you can do. Whereas if you co-create the regulation with them privately, then you get the result that you want. I think SEC just called what I would call a fantastic, I'm proud of SEC, let's just put it that way. The work they did with Tosin's team to quickly come up with regulations and start to prepare for that is a very responsive way of running regulation, and I'm proud of that.
Thanks a lot, Abu. I think my takeaway is co-create with the regulators as opposed to, trying to say, well, maybe that's a dead end or they don't actually quite get it. I'm still getting quite a few comments in terms of our audience from outside of Nigeria and even participants in Nigeria who are looking to expand beyond Nigeria. And Robert, I'd love to hear from you how you've seen partnerships and the partnership mentality or mindset in different countries, right? What are the considerations to take into account as you try to leverage partnerships to scale across borders?
Okay, thank you. It's quite interesting. We live in a very, speaking for Africa, it's kind of fragmented. What works in one country may be slightly different from the other, and the challenge there is how you actually make sure that you're putting up a package that will work across board. I think that it's very important for fintechs to look out for other similar organizations in their industries across the continent. So if you look at Ghana, you look at Nigeria, you would definitely have to sit back and see who you can leverage on. So for example, other types of company like Paga that sit in Ghana, for example, or sit in Sierra Leone or Liberia. What can we do together? And when you try to build a network amongst like-minded industry players, there's so much that you can do together and come together and give a package to organizations like ours that can work with you. So you pick on each other's back, So that's very, very key. I think it's always important to double click into what's happening in various markets and make sure that you can find the right people, the right partnerships, the right integrity, setups that you can work with.
Thanks a lot, Robert. Sounds like, there's something around fintech collaboration, right? So when you're thinking about expanding to new countries, don't just think you have to work with the largest institutions there. You can find peers to work with and to sort of come with a combined proposition to maybe some larger partners. So I think, Tayo, on that point, I know you've been very active in terms of just creating support networks for other entrepreneurs. Are there fintech to fintech collaborations? Are we seeing them? How are they playing out? What needs to happen in that space?
Yeah, no, there's a lot going on fintech to fintech that is just maybe not being spoken about. And I really like how Elsa put it on the open APIs, right? We've seen, share my Slack channel as like about 60, like in our case now, since we opened up all our APIs earlier this year, 60 different companies just integrating, doing different things. And a bunch of them have gone live, variety of use cases, leveraging the payments infrastructure that we built. And we also, as we think about new markets, think about it the way Robert is saying, is like, who are the companies that can help us with the infrastructure in those places that we need, right? Because you don't need to reinvent every wheel. Right. So I think where things are going with open APIs is the idea that you will have lightweight partnerships, quote unquote, right? You don't always have to go and have this big legal agreement. The API is there. The pricing is there. The bulk, as your volumes grow, pricing goes down, model is there. So let's just go, right? And let's get going, right? And so I think that's the way things will eventually move. But I also say, don't hesitate to shoot your shot, right? Like, we talk about shooting your shot with dating. It's the same thing on partnerships. You have to shoot your shot, send that message to that person on Twitter, right? Use your VPN, but send that message to that person on Facebook, wherever it is. And I say to everyone, respond, right? I respond to as many things as I can. Not everything is going to best of my time, but I respond to everything. And I try to make sure that we can help, because the young startup today is going to be the big company tomorrow, right? So let's be there to help, right? And let's be there to help shepherd, people along as well, and see where the opportunities are. So I think you would find there's more and more openness today than when I started, to be honest, about like partnering across the ecosystem, not just in Nigeria, but across the continent, which I'm really, really excited to see. So I would really encourage people just to, go out there and see what is possible.
Thanks a lot, Tayo. I'm going to ask Tomi this: how have you shot your shot? I'm seeing a lot of comments in the chat box around how do you network when you're shy? What do you do? Tayo's told us how he's met people and connected, right? But can you share maybe a practical example of how you actually network and create these opportunities?
Yeah, thank you, Topsy, for that. I would like to say that a lot of people always assume that you have to have built the network, or you went to the right schools, or you had this. Almost everyone I've met within the journey of Bankly, I met while trying to network. Talking about what Mr. Suleiman said, and everyone said about aligning and co-creating with the regulators. I remember attending a conference once. I used to attend every conference that was necessary, aligned with where the people I wanted to connect with were speaking. And I remember going to one of the regulators, the director in one of the spaces, and I sat with him, and I was still ideating. So I went with him and said, this is what we're thinking. These are the partners we're trying to look at. And what people always misunderstand is, like he said, if you're aligned with what they're doing and you actually cooperate with them, they will give you the best advice. And if they advise you and you go back and say, oh, you advised me this way, they won't throw you under the bus after they advise you in a certain direction. So I remember sitting with him, and he said, you should go through, you should consider this partnership, you should talk to this person. And by the time I went to those partners, like for instance, going to Mr. Suleiman, I'll say, oh, this person mentioned I should talk to you. So here was I meeting this person for the first time, and he just gave me some recommendations. And I was using this opportunity to also leverage those contacts he mentioned, even if I didn't know them directly. That was one. And that has helped us regulatory wise a lot, because in a way, that experience makes us leverage, go back and say, these are the mistakes, these are the things we're considering, this is what we found, and the co-creation just continues from there. The second thing is always about, I remember I've sent a cold call email to Mr. Suleiman before and say, hey, Mr. Suleiman, my name is this and that. Apologies for coming this route. I think courage is important. And if you're going to be an entrepreneur anyway, if you can't take the courage to do and break down the fear. But I'll also mention though that a lot, because I think apart from Tosin, I'm probably the youngest startups on this, so I would like to talk for people who are like me in the audience. I also mentioned that a lot of founders are afraid that this idea they have going to those big partners would not see the light of day. And there's so many times when we have even banks, certain banks that have a reputation and say, oh, if you go to this bank, this is what will happen. But I think, again, the courage, I've stepped in front of someone before and I didn't realize I was talking to this person. I thought I was talking to someone else. And when he gave me his card, I said, oh, I'm sorry. I thought I was talking to this person. I didn't know you are from this bank. And he's like, why do you think? So I said, I blotted it out. I said, it's been often said that this bank is not friendly to young startups. And so why? So here I am saying exactly, not going on Twitter to say, and of course, here he is to try and prove it to me that it is wrong. So I think there is need for courage and just in the need to just continue to innovate, directly addressing and meeting people that you need along the journey is important. I would also like to say something. I think I wrote down 4 things across. I said the fear, which I think networking would help. I think that balance, and Mr. Suleiman has talked about alignment, but there was something very critical that Elsa mentioned around time and scope. And it's very true that a lot of startups, the value we bring is the agility. And so sometimes when we're dealing with the legacy companies, they have a long time. But people do misunderstand that lighter, I just want to reiterate, that lighter form of partnerships, that open API, by the time you're able to prove to them that this is what I've done with your open API, with your lighter form of partnership, the conversation around deeper contract, the conversation around co-branding can then come. And if we can just make sure that a lot of startups know that these companies have these APIs available. For instance, I never knew that Paga had an open API ready as at this year. I think if MTN has such, we need to make sure that there is that information out there, the data out there, and people can leverage without trying to find someone within Elsa's team or trying to get Elsa's email that can take 6 months. I think that's very important. And those are things we've done so far.
Thanks a lot, Tomi. Thanks a lot, Tomi, for sharing that. Elsa, I would like to dig a bit deeper based on some of the things Tomi shared and what you mentioned earlier about, what is the necessity of partnerships, right? And specifically, it would be good to get your sense. We've spoken that there are different types of partnerships. There could be partnerships for regulation. There could be partnerships for, commercial arrangements and so on and so forth. For MTN, right, are there parts of the value chain where you think fintechs could actually create value for you? This is not about what you can do for fintechs. This is about what you think fintechs can do for you. And do you think it differs by market? You've been in Uganda, you're in Nigeria here. Do you find that it differs or it's the same perspective across?
Yeah, sure. Okay, very good question. So yes, of course, for MTN, there is a lot of future in the fintech. I'm actually surprised that McKinsey does only a 3x3 matrix, because actually a 4x4. Telco is absolutely necessary on this partnership. There's a lot of examples, right? Orange bought a bank and so on. So there's a lot of cross telco bank. I mean, if we take the example of Safaricom, a lot of telco fintech partnership, M-Pesa with so many fintech. So I'm very surprised that McKinsey forgot that, and we hope that actually Mayoa will explain why she forgot the fourth row or the fourth column, right? So no, the fintech is clearly the area of the future for MTN strategy. And I think outside of Nigeria, where the regulation is very tough, we have rolled out like mobile money in so many countries, being part of the banking industry, being part of the fintech industry. And we believe based on the subscriber base, the footprint, bringing a lot of value to this industry. So yes, it's a very key. Yes, Nigeria is different, different in a good way and different in a less good way. It's different because regulation is tough on telco, right? So outside of, we didn't get the PSB despite we applied more than 2 years ago. So 9mobile Glo have that famous license that would enable telco to fully enter the playground, while MTN and Airtel are still waiting for it. In the meantime, we are doing super-agent activities, but obviously is like the smaller piece of the cake that we would like to get, right? So, however, I think what is very positive in Nigeria is the quantity and the quality of the fintech innovation that we find in the country. I mean, it's amazing. Despite the fact that there is no mobile money, the quality of what has been achieved via NIPS, via like the effort of the bank to move to mobile banking has actually also support that fintech enabling environment. So for me, like if the MTN fintech finally get this license, is the most thriving environment for MTN fintech, that's for sure. So, and I think most of the time, I also think we will do good for sure, but we'll do super good if we enter this market with the good partners. So I think there's a lot of, for fintech, I mean, it's very wide, right? There's a lot of niche that will not be able to address as MTN fintech. So to address those niche, this is where we don't have the skills. We don't have maybe the technology, or partially, we don't fully understand the technology. This is where there is like missing pieces of the puzzle that we can only get via partnership. So again, partnership, we redefine exactly what kind of partnership. Is it like, can you do it actually for Open API? Do we need to sit around the table? Is it even a joint venture? Should we like actually put a thing? Is it like an acquisition or partnership with a buyout options? So those, I think there is a lot of way, but yes, it's definitely at the agenda for MTN FinTech, and partnership is, I believe, what will unlock most of the value when we will be fully equipped from a regulatory perspective.
Thanks a lot, Elsa. And I think for those who are worried that does MTN care about partnerships or not, I think Elsa has made the case very clearly. There are tons of opportunity for partnerships, but don't expect that it's going to be handed to you on a platter. You're going to have to figure out where you can key in, what niches you can solve for them. You're going to figure out if they can get it alternatively through other means. And you're also going to have to take into consideration some of the things she mentioned earlier, timeline, scope, and so on and so forth. Thanks a lot, Elsa, for providing that perspective. I'm going to ask one more question to our panel before I move to Q&A. And I'm going to direct this to Tomi, Tosin, and Tayo, anyone who wants to share a perspective. But I've seen a lot of comments around, can partnerships also help you in terms of funding, right? And I want you to think about this broadly, not just in terms of funding they invested into my company, but funding that it basically takes some cash flow demands off you, right? So perhaps funding an equipment or things like that that might help you without necessarily putting money into your venture. Great to hear your experiences around that with other partners. All right, let me go with Tomi since Mike is muted.
Yeah, I was waiting for it. We have had such an experience most recently. Sometime late 2019, we realized that we needed to keep, we needed to go in a direction we didn't intend to go, meaning we needed to equip some of our agents with the necessary tools. And of course, being a very early stage startup, we didn't have the required funding. So we did approach, like Tayo said, fintech to fintech partnerships are ongoing. We did approach a fintech with a bigger balance sheet and had the cash flow. And they were able to invest the money or buy those assets in their name and then pass it on to us to distribute and to do what was necessary. However, I would like to share that there are pros and cons to such approach, because especially within the technology of the fintech space, the infrastructure across, you want it for a better uptime and certain things, you need to be flexible enough to move across. For both pricing, uptime, you want flexibility. And so we realized that there were the cons where we didn't have that flexibility across various dimensions, but we were able to get we're able to move at the right time. So it's actually very critical that a startup is looking at what are we trying to achieve at that time. It really worked well for us, but for a period of time. And that actually goes into, that drives me to a question I also add, and that's basically to, I think was going to be to Mr. Suleiman and Elsa. Mr. Suleiman did mention that they need fintechs for, the main word being experimentation. And Elsa also mentioned around their willingness to partner with fintechs now and what happens when they get a PSB. So at the end of the day, even a fintech, an MTN or a Sterling or any of those brands started one day, an industry started one day from one founder as a small startup. Now, so everyone's dream is to build a sustainable business. So if you then partner from an experimentation point of view, what happens to the fintech after the experimentation? What happens to the fintech after the license is gotten? So and when we talk about transformational partnerships, we need to I don't want us to come here and say the right things that doesn't move the needle for people who want to come into the space coming next, because the fear is tangible and it's a potential and true fear. Because what happens after you've then shown this growth number and after you've shown this growth number and then the growth is not, or the experimentation is over and you're not able to scale because you're not connected transformation. And I would like to say Mr. Suleiman is probably one of the few within the space who think from that transformation, what are we trying to do in the space together? But how can we make this mindset an holistic thing across banks and telcos? Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Toby, for sharing. Tosin?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. And I think, I can't speak for anybody, but I can speak for how we think about it. So I think a business relationship is a business relationship, and, ownership or that kind of relationship is a different kind of relationship. And it's possible that the two intersect and it can be beneficial. So, I won't out which of our investors is also providing us with some partner business value, just, I haven't got their consent, but we do have some investors who provide absolutely invaluable business services, and to know that they're tied in a way that, we guarantee their ongoing commitment, and they also understand our business and therefore can be flexible or agile about needs. That's a win-win. On the partnership side, just looking at it a bit differently, having credible partners can lead to knock-on effects of being more able to take on investments from others. But, our own view, at least my own view, is that, you can commingle too, but if it's the deal, maybe it's not, it's maybe a red flag. So if somebody's going into just a business partnership only to invest in you, or investing in you only for a business partnership, then maybe incentives may not be aligned, because, business relationship, you want it to be long-term, but there's a chance it's not. But ownership is forever. You might as well treat it that way. So I think it's important to make sure those two boxes are ticked. And again, yeah, we're lucky to have some great investors who we have business relationships with, and they understand that. We would have taken their money without the business relationship, and that was a key qualification. So I think that's our view on that. Yeah.
Excellent. Thanks a lot, Tosin. Thank you. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to open it up to questions coming from the audience, of which we have quite a few. I'm going to kick off with a question for Robert. How do you manage relationships with various parties, regulators, banks, other partners in international remittances between countries? What are some of the challenges and how do you deal with them?
Well, gosh, there are lots of challenges, but I think one key thing is you need to get yourself out there all the time in the face of the regulator. it kind of gets difficult, especially, you know, having to move around and what it takes to do that. But you really need to get yourself known by the various regulators. And sometimes when they don't regulate you directly, you need to even get to know them. So yeah, one thing there is you need to be out there in their face and get to meet them as often as possible. The thing about these regulators is that what they draft is not always cast in stone, and they're very open to rework the draft. And we've seen that happen several times. So sometimes, you know, regulators are skewed towards a certain size of a player. And when you sit with them and break things down and talk to them, they're really very open-minded. And we've seen that happen several times. Yeah, the other challenge there is, you know, I mean, unrelated to that, but our market gets very big, and there's so many industry players and so many of them coming into the market, and it makes it difficult to you know, to maintain market in various countries and, you know, keep the numbers coming in. And we've touched on this. It helps to leverage on other partnerships within the continent that can make you you know, not do everything yourself, but, you know, pick on other partnerships and make it happen. And that also works.
Thanks so much, Robert. Thank you. I'm going to ask a question for Elsa. The question goes, with regards to your open API for financial services, we would guess you have a lot of aggregator connections. Would an established fintech that could help manage these connections make sense for you in terms of a value proposition?
Well, I know it's always like the question for the aggregators, right? If actually we open the API and so on, where should they reposition themselves into an ecosystem that get a bit shaken, right? What if the clients of the aggregators suddenly realize, wow, but I could actually connect directly with MTN? So this is an open question for the aggregators, and you need to help us to build the answer together, right? Is there still a level of aggregation that is needed, and what level of service, what service layer would you provide, and that we are not able to provide via our own API layer? Is it that you can like support like maybe a second way to connect with MTN where your own connection is done? I mean, I think you need to really define the value proposition in this new world. It cannot be the same. So, but there is value proposition, and there is value that you can bring to the ecosystem, and that you can put together as a business.
Excellent. Thank you, Elsa. Tayo, can you talk a little bit more about networking? And I mean networking for shy people. I don't get the sense that you're shy, right? So you are probably a natural networker, but can you give some practical advice for founders who are shy, who have a fear of networking, some tangible tips on how they could go about it?
Yeah, it's funny, I'm actually more an introvert. It doesn't seem that way, but I actually am. You know, I think what I do is, okay, for example, if I'm in a room, right, where there's specifically someone who I know is there and I want to talk to, I actually psych myself up, right? And either try and figure out if somebody I know knows the person and they can connect me to them and just introduce me, or I just sort of walk my way over there. But you have to then be conscious that that person was there doing something else, right? Like, so rather than just come in and say, here's everything I'm looking for from you, no, right? Actually learn about the person, right? So ask them questions. Unfortunately, people like to talk about themselves. So ask them questions, just get to know them and be curious about them. And I think that would ultimately lead to them also asking you a question, well, what do you do? And then, you know, that would also sort of bring it out. but it's tough, right? I think you have to find out how to psych yourself. You know, I had a call yesterday, or was it 2 days ago? And before the call, I played Will Smith for 10 minutes, right? Like just psyching myself up before that call with this person, right? This was a big call. And actually I put it on our internal chat in the company. And I said, I'm listening to Will Smith. What do you guys listen to psych yourself up, right? And then that created a bunch of chatter. But yeah, you literally have to do things like that, you know, whatever works, right? Because, you know, it's that, you know, if you get one shot, one opportunity, what do you do? Do you take it? Right.
Well, thanks a lot. Thanks, Tayo, for sharing that. Tosin and Tomi, from your perspective, we're getting a lot of questions about how do I start my fintech? How do I partner in terms of regulation and licensing, right? Have there been creative ways that you've leveraged other players or created partnerships to help you address regulatory gaps, whether in terms of you didn't have the right license, but you could partner? How did you go about that? Could you share some learnings on that, please?
Sure, I think I'll take this one first, and I think Tomi can finish. Yeah, I think for this, it's all about ensuring that you understand the actual rules, and then you're looking for creative ways to partner in a way that you still fall within them. That's on one side, and then I think on the other side, it's always best to let the regulator know. Doesn't mean you have to go in there and ask to be regulated, but you want to be able to have a paper trail to show that your intentions were always good. And then you structure yourself as if you were regulated. That's how we approached it, and we think it worked out well, mainly because it's very clear when you step into a room, a regulator has to assess not just the facts of your operation, like on paper, but like, does it look like there's an intent to circumvent what we have, or is this actually like value adding for the industry? So when it's very clear that's value adding, and it's just like, okay, how do we figure out these rules? If you're summoned, then at that point, you're going in with good intention. Of course, you've got to find partners who also interpret what you're doing and how you're doing it as this is also within the law. So that's how I would think about it. Obviously, innovation always pushes the boundary, but I don't think any boundary pushing is just in and of itself good. You want to be able to walk in, talk to the most skeptical person who's pro-regulation, and have that person say, that makes sense. The rules just maybe need to be updated soon. So that's how I would approach it. So you find a good anchor partner who can buy in that, you are serious, you do look regulated, you do intend to be regulated, you're not trying to avoid it. And then if you're summoned, and perhaps even put it on your roadmap that you will be regulated, and maybe set when that would be, so that if you're summoned, it's kind of like, hey, it's just an acceleration of the plan, rather than a situation where you have to completely go back to the drawing board because maybe one had an unrealistic expectation that you could just innovate and never get regulated.
Yeah, no, thanks a lot, Tosin. Very practical steps that I think will put a lot of fintechs in good stead as you think about regulatory requirements, and also make it easier for people to partner with you, right? I think that's so important. Tomi, any thoughts to share on that?
Yeah, I'll say Tosin has shared the stuff around regulation. So I wouldn't share mine, because the question that is just on my mind from fintech is, do you ask for permission or do you ask for forgiveness? But the truth is, I think what I align with is the anchor partner. Like like you mentioned, people like the banks they have navigated these waters quite successfully, and you're still also trying to figure it out. You don't even know. Sometimes you don't even know who or what you should be should be talking to, even if it's the central bank. Sometimes you don't know, should you be talking to the whole feed, or should we be talking to payment services? So finding an anchor, which is back to networking, showing them the value, showing that if you are able, this is your path to regulation, but while you're trying to do that, this is the value that brings to them. There's an alignment while you're testing, or while you both are experimenting. This is what I know that has worked, that anchor, but there has to be a terminal date to that anchor, because as much as possible, like Mr. Suleiman said, you might be under the radar with the anchor for a while, but as you're growing, you can't remain under the radar. So then you need to directly engage the regulators and reach out to them and ask where this is what we are trying to do. This is what we've tested. This is our pilot. This is the result we've gotten, and we are trying to see how to make sure we are aligned with the law and the regulators. And I think that's where I see is a good step to then start engaging the regulators. So first for me is an anchor partner. Then the next step is direct engagement, then going on to getting the required license as a third step. Yeah.
Thanks a lot, Tomi. I like that whole concept around finding an anchor partner. Don't spread as much as you want to shoot your shots, don't spread your shots everywhere. Focus, concentrate, grab that anchor partner and get things moving. Now, this question is for Tayo and Robert. Feel free to share as you're able. But a lot of people have been asking for practical sort of examples of how you create a value proposition, right? I'm not sure if you could just share an example of a partnership that you struck and sort of what were the key components of the value proposition? What did you bring to the table? What did the partner bring to the table? So we can get very tangible for people who are thinking of how to create partnership propositions.
Robert, I'll let you take that first.
Okay, well, since we're dealing with startups here, it may be a bit tricky if it's relevant for them, because these type of good transactions, unfortunately, have been with the bigger ones. So, we live in an industry where the big ones are getting bigger, and sometimes it crowds out the smaller players. So we have so I mentioned in introducing our industry, we have coverages, services that give us a wide coverage for various countries. So, for example, we have one company that's based in Ghana that medium size, very strong. It's still in a startup stage, probably 5 years old, that we work with, that has done good aggregation with all the telcos and also is able to reach every bank account in that particular country. And we did a pilot project that allowed us to reach the Ghana market. But they have also done very good partnerships through other fintechs outside the country. So once we did start and it worked well, it was very easy for us to open up the market for them to give us multiple countries, for example. And that has worked very well. I do know that they've leveraged on other fintechs in those other countries, which is fine for us. I mean, and companies like us like to go direct, but because they were tried and tested for one particular market and it worked so well, we gained a lot of trust, and we've been able to open up our business to them in I think 4 or 5 other countries, and it's working very well. I think the key thing there is for them, they worked hard to negotiate with us to do that start, and they did it so well. And when it worked, we were very happy to open up our market to them. And I think it's good business. So it's been good business so far. So you can't really make it happen. The key thing is once you get that first project, give it your best shot, make it work. And if it's a good company that's big, they can then expand and give you other frontiers. So that's just one small example.
Thanks, Robert. Tayo, anything to share on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think I can't share very, like, here's the name of a company, etc. But there's several partnerships that we engage with, and I guess very practically, like, I think what we end up doing is we actually call it a discovery call, where we want to better understand what they're trying to accomplish and actually have an open brainstorm of how what we have could be helpful in some way or the other, right? And in so doing, we also discover around the economics for them, right? And what do you charge for this? What do you charge for that? We know sort of what our costs are and what our minimum bars are. But then on that, we have rate sheets, but then we have a conversation, right? And then we try to align things around as you grow, things, your price will come down, right? As best as we can, right? so that it's, there's something in it for you as you're building a business, right? And actually for us, we'd rather just collect something small and grow with you, right? And let's figure that growth together, right? And then beyond even the pricing, etc., how else could we help you? We have a big ecosystem. Are there ways for us to promote what you're doing into our ecosystem, into our customers? Is what you're doing helpful to us? Maybe one example I would give is, we are actually opening up our platform, our ecosystem, to allow other services to be brought into the platform, right? We've done this today with a partnership with on insurance. We're looking at, we're all come and talk to Tosin and the folks at Chaka as well, right? We need to get, people to be able to buy stocks, trade stock, etc. We're not going to do these things. These are things that we're not going to. Someone else is already doing that. We will actually come and say, we have an ecosystem. Why don't we bring these things into that ecosystem, right? For mutual benefit. And so I think that those discovery calls really help us figure out what helps with both sides. And I think, and when we are also the ones wanting something, we still find that valuable because we want to understand the other side very well.
Thanks a lot, Tayo. I love the concept of discovery calls. This whole thing is about relationship management. It's about engaging and really keeping an eye open to see how can I solve problems for you versus what can I get from you. While the poll is going on, I see a few hands up, so I'm going to allow folks to ask the questions directly. Taufik Olani, I'm going to allow you to please ask your question.
Greetings, everybody.
Please go ahead with your question. Please go ahead, we can hear you.
Yeah, I'm Taufik. So I have a question on partnership. I'm not quite really in fintech space, but my startup is in health technology. So we are looking forward for partnership, but based on health regulations, I just want to ask the panel audience, how can you integrate fintech to health technology to make individual have access to affordable health? Please, can you get me?
Sorry, please just ask your question again. How can you partner to drive affordable health? Is that what you said?
Yes, we are looking forward to, how can you partner with fintech for affordable health technology? Hello, can you get me quite all right?
Yes, we can.
Yeah.
Okay, anyone able or willing to take that question?
Yeah, I don't think you have the right audience for that question.
All right. Sorry,
Yeah.
Taufik, maybe we'll store the question and see offline if there's anyone that could sort of make a contribution to that. I'm going to allow David to speak. David, please go ahead and ask your question.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. My name is David, and it's been an incredible session. I just wanted to ask a question as regards to the marketing for fintech organizations and reaching out to the target audience. I want to believe that, can you hear me clearly?
Yes, you can.
So I want to believe that most fintechs target audience are usually Gen Zs and millennials. And so how does fintech organizations go about their marketing with marketing with influencers or other organizations? For instance, I run an organization called 20 Stripe, and it's just a community-based platform for people in their 20s. So what is a fintech organization looking for in partnership for marketing to get across to these young people, Gen Zs and millennials? What are those things that fintech organization looks for? Thank you. Do I say that again? Am I clear?
No, I think we heard you. I mean, I think maybe I'll take a stab at it. I mean, I think first of all, people are looking for reach, right? And also just understanding that whichever channels they're trying to use, they're hitting the right audience, as you said, right? And that audience and the material and content is relatable to the audience, right? And so I think, for people who have audiences or companies like yours, you have to be able to demonstrate that you have that ability to get the message to the right sets of people, right? I think that's really where that's at.
Thanks a lot, Tayo. And I know there are still a few more hands up, but I know we're running short on time. But please continue to sort of type in your questions in the Q&A box or in the chat box. And I believe after the event, there'll be a summary of questions that are shared. At this point, I would love to hand it over to Tomiwa. But before I do, I'd love to say a big thank you to the panelists. Thank you for the insights. So many nuggets from this conversation around how to actually solve problems, how to think about structuring partnerships, and tangible things on what you need to do as a fintech. Thank you very much. Tomiwa, over to you.
Thank you so much, Topsy. Thank you, Mayowa. Thank you to all of the panelists. We really do appreciate your time. It's been a really great session. I hope that the audience found it as valuable as we did. We thought it was really, really useful. I'd like to thank Tayo, thank Elsa, thank Robert, thank Tosin, thank Abu for your time today and for sharing your wisdom, for sharing your lessons. There's a post-event survey that we will share. Well, actually, no, before I jump into post-event survey. The next TechCabal Live events holds on July 9th. We do these very regularly, as you've seen today. They are super valuable. The speakers share all kinds of knowledge, and some of these feel like a mini MBA session. So please join us for the next one on TechCabal Live. If you subscribe to our Twitter, if you follow our Twitter handle, our YouTube, our LinkedIn, wherever it's convenient for you, we will send dates and details ahead of time. You should, of course, be subscribed to the TechCabal newsletter, which also has a great deal of detail on a daily basis about what's happening in tech in Africa. The team is going to share a post-event survey. If you could please fill it, it's useful for us to know what we're doing right, what we can do better, and how we can delight the audience, which is one of our goals as a team. We'd also like to say a big thank you to Chaka for their partnership and support of this event. Again, you should go to their website, chaka.com/license, and they're doing amazing things in terms of allowing borderless investing for Africans. Thank you very much. The TC Insights unit put together this event, and they put together all our events. They also handle our research, our data, and they provide actionable data on startups and the tech ecosystem to investors, to big tech companies trying to understand, to small startups trying to understand the ecosystem, to regulators who are trying to get a better handle of what's happening on ground. And you should definitely check them out. It's techcabal.com/TC Insights. Thank you, Lanre, Bolu, Bolaji, and I'm still going to get in trouble, but thank you to the entire team. And if you're not already subscribed to the TechCabal Daily, please subscribe. Super useful. TechCabal's just launched a new website. If it's been a while since you've been to the TechCabal website, please go to techcabal.com and check it out and subscribe to the newsletter. We have the TC Daily, which comes out 5 days a week, 7 a.m. West African time. We also have the Next Wave, which comes out weekly and is a deeper dive into the big trends sort of driving the next wave of innovation across the continent. So you should subscribe to them both. Again, thank you very much, everyone, for joining us today. And we hope to see you soon for the next one. Have a wonderful day, everyone.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you.
Very much. Bye.
Thank you all.